Hello, welcome to this evening's discussion on with using civil discourse to discuss cancel culture. Our team was tasked with conducting a project that would make an impact on our community, and one extremely important issue is communication, or in these days, the lack thereof. Everyone seems to live in their own echo chambers, with the only ideas they agree with being presented to them. Therefore, they believe the ideas to be true. Our team's goal is to promote civil discourse, which is basically just a way to have a discussion without putting down the other side, without trying to convince the other side that your argument is correct, but instead trying to present your argument to find common ground and to try to get others to see where you're coming from.
The steps to creating a conversation using civil discourse are 1. Identify a topic and recruit your target audience. 2. Bring in 2 groups with opposing views. 3. Survey both groups. Facilitate a dialogue about the chosen topic using a moderator. And 4. Survey both groups again and determine next action steps to continue the dialogue.
Today's topic for our session, as Maddie said, is the issue of cancel culture. Now, cancel culture, if you don't know, is a pretty common thing these days. Basically, it's the act of finding out something that someone did in their past that would be held up negative to today's standards. Typically, this is done on social media, and those who are canceled range from brands to celebrities to historical figures. The acts that have been done by these people can be done from many years ago, even centuries ago, to even just a couple weeks ago. The questions we'll be discussing today all revolve around this topic, but this is far from the only topic a discussion along these lines can be about. This is simply an example of a controversial topic that we will be using to show you how civil discourse can be had.
So we also have these surveys that we're going to give to our participants. So the questions on the surveys are there to evaluate how they're feeling before and after the surveys and after the discussion, so that we can find out how they feel about our discussion. So the first question would be, how aware do you think you are about every topic that is brought up in the cancel culture, or brought up in cancel culture? Do you give all topics the same importance? Do you believe that canceling culture is something positive or negative? Do you think that it is possible to change your opinion on the idea of cancel culture or a specific topic? Yes or no? Do you believe that it is possible to have a civil discussion on heavy-hearted topics such as racism and hateful stereotypes? Yes or no? Do you believe that this discussion will have a positive or negative outcome? What are you expecting to learn from this?
Alright, so thank you all for coming. So our first question that we're going to be talking about is, so obviously we're talking about cancel culture, right? So let's talk about sports teams. So there have been recently a change coming towards several sports teams, whether it's all the way up at the professional level down to high schools and middle schools across the country, about using racial stereotypes as mascots. So opponents of this say that mascot is a part of their history, of the school's history. Oftentimes they go back decades of usage, and people who want the change say that it is racist. So should these mascots be canceled, and how much should history be taken into account when it comes to these particular imagery and names that are being used?
I go to St. Joseph's High School, and our mascot's an Indian. And I guess the most clearest example in my life is on our football helmets. We have a spear, and my brother had it, and my brother is 6 years older than me, and now we don't have it. So in that time, the spear has gone away, and there's rumors at our school that the name Indians will be changed, which is kind of interesting to me because our school has a mural and a lot of descriptions and paintings and positive things, talking about the Native Americans who lived in our our area in South Bend today, and it has like a lot of paintings and like not professional, but like nice words and like things to promote the positives of the Native Americans in our city or in our land before it came in South Bend. So I think it's a hard topic because some people are always going to see it as it's positive, and some people are going to see it as it's negative. And I guess what I'm trying to say is my perception is that St. Joe's using it as a positive way instead of a negative.
Yeah, you definitely have to look at the whole story for things like that. History and the way that it's being used does come into account regarding anything, I believe, especially with something like mascot. They can slightly edit so that it's less offensive, but they shouldn't get rid of it entirely, especially since it does have history, but it also is able to shine light on a ostracized group that is usually not given the light that they deserve.
I also feel like in all of these stories, people changing their mascots and their the only people that aren't consulted when they're talking about changing these actual mascots are the people the mascots are about. They're never asking a Native American person, okay, what do you think about the Redskins? Do you think that this is a good thing that was changed? Do you think it's a bad thing? I never see that. I always see some like white girl on the news. It's terrible. It has to be taken down. So it's racist. And well, maybe they're not insulted by it. I don't know. Have you asked them? I feel like we shouldn't just assume that people are being insulted by this term, or that if it's, I feel like reclamation is kind of this new like thing that's coming on, so maybe they should reclaim the term. Maybe it's time to change it up a little bit instead of just completely wiping the slate and trying to isolate this term and make it a bad word and don't say this word because it's bad. Maybe we need to reclaim these words instead of just shutting them out.
I think by saying everything's bad, it gives like a negative stigma and a negative stereotype to like Native Americans, since we're talking about Redskins or Indians. I think it gives the whole topic a negative stigma. So it's like if somebody like has an encounter with them, all they've experienced is a negative stigma. So maybe that's how they're going to treat them. But if it's changed in a good light, then it'll have positive interactions.
Where we live, there's a lot of things named after Native American tribes like Mishawaka and all that. So for us, the Indians is okay. I disagree with Redskin. I don't think if it can be counted as a slur, and if you wouldn't say it to someone's face. So like the Redskins, I don't agree. I think that should be changed or reclamated, yeah. But for like Indians and terms like that, I agree that they should be allowed to stay because that's just part of the history. Like Mishawaka, for the longest time, they were marooners, and they didn't mean that as the term it is now. They meant it as like marooners, like maroon. But that term is also a term for describing a runaway slave. So they changed it to be cavemen, which is because they were loud and obnoxious. So they took like what they were told against as a negative word, they took it as, oh, we're loud cavemen. So they claimed something negative and changed it into our mascot now, which I think we could do, but it's not up to, like what you said. I don't think that people who it's not offending should have a say in what should be done about it. So if a Native American group had brought up the subject of, oh, let's change the Redskins, I'd be like, yeah, I understand what they're coming from, I get that. Or if an owner was like Native American, I don't agree with people who it shouldn't offend, being offended by it. Like, you can be offended by it, but you can't personally be like, okay, we have to change it because I'm upset, because it is not something that was negative towards you. Like, we all as a people would say, hey, this is wrong, but we all as a people cannot say, this offends me the same way as it offends you. So because it offends us both equally, we have to get rid of it, because that is not as one group of people's decision. It should be the people who it is defaming or is negative towards, they should be able to say, we want to change, we want to like this, but that doesn't really happen. So if it was like the people who it's against, if they verbally are like, we don't like it, that should open the conversation for changing it. But if it's not the group who it is negative against saying it, I don't think that it should be ignored entirely, but I don't think it should be canceled. Like, it should not be canceled, like one white person saying this is bad to another white person, like, okay, congrats, like, but where's the people who are offended by it? Where's the people who it's making fun of? Where's their voice? So they should have a say. It shouldn't just be one white person having another white savior complex, like, let's get rid of this. Like, I don't agree with that. I think the people who it is negative to should be the ones with the power to reclaim it, like you said, or get rid of it entirely.
Definitely. About the white savior complex, that is something that cancel culture seems to really ride upon. And this idea that a white woman that sees, oh, this seems like it would upset this person of color. Let me make sure that they know that it's upsetting. When it really truly isn't, because, well, one, as a person of color, there are far worse things to me than a mascot that decides to look browner or redder than they should. Especially if the uniforms are also red. It's kind of the colors. But there's far worse acts of racism that can definitely be addressed. And instead of giving these minuscule things that, yes, can be discussed later on once the larger things are taken care of, as much light or more light than larger things that should be in the moment we need to discuss right now because it's actually serious, then that's not cool at all. And that's definitely contradicting the entire purpose. Like, if someone was to say during the 2020 summer, where the Black Lives Matter movement was at its strongest, and there were a lot of peaceful protests that turned into riots, a lot of people, instead of discussing the actual purpose of what was happening, were doing very foolish things. Like, they were dropping all the way down to their underwear and twerking in front of the police. You are not only disrespecting the people that you purposely went out there to go acknowledge and say that you support, but you are also making a fool of yourself, and you're distracting and showing your character, because clearly it wasn't actually meant for the people that you said you're there for. It's for you. And that's the main problem with cancel culture, because it's not for the person that they're trying to protect, it's for their personal safety and for their personal, well, I did something, I feel like a savior, my activism is done for the day.
Like, I agree with that, because there's certain things that, like, people will tell you you're supposed to be upset about, and I don't. Modern Family, does everyone know that show? Sofia Vergara, I hate that show because of how they interact. One of the only Hispanic characters, and when people think of a Hispanic person, they think of, oh, her. So we were talking about it in class one day about something that we would want changed. I was like, oh, I don't like how Sofia Vergara is treated in that show. I don't like how she can't speak clearly. She's hot-headed, and I hate that. And my teacher was like, okay, well, let's focus on something more important. It's like, what she was finding as important to her was not important to me. I personally don't like the imagery in media. That's my choice, and if I have an issue with that, I want to talk about that. I think at a larger scale, we all need to acknowledge all issues instead of just focusing on like small ones, like itty bitty, like not itty bitty, like they're big to some, but there's such minor things that everyone's getting focused on that like doesn't need to be ignored, but that should not be the main focal point. Like the Redskins, like during that like big thing, the pipeline in Oklahoma was going on, and all that anyone was talking about was the football team and not like the oil. Like, so I think that a lot of it is just distractions from the bigger issues most of the time. So that's why I don't really like. I don't know. Like, I think it should be acknowledging that it's wrong. It needs to be, but it doesn't need to be full out. Just like scrape it out, get rid of it. It needs to be. This is part of a bigger problem, and usually we focus on the small problems.
Instead of trying to cut the tails off the snakes, you should go for the head.
Yeah.
So we kind of already touched on this. So So should we focus then on maybe making these changes that can kind of be labeled as canceling? Should something be canceled when maybe a small minority, not like a racial minority, just a smaller number of people want to cancel a particular topic or person?
It really depends on the actual thing this person has done, and if there is actual proof, and if there is actual people affected or it will affect. And if it's like, if this person's attitude is just bad, yeah, I mean, yeah, stop seeing them as much. But if it's something that they're actually physically doing that is harming other people, there does need to be some kind of justification, or at least they need to tell us what's going on, and we can make our own inferences from there. Because it's hard as a human just to say, okay, we see this one side of things, and then we base it all on that one side. We should not do that, but we do that very frequently. We should look at all sides of the situation and the problem, and be able to find a solution based off of all of our information. And I agree that if one minority were to say, hey, take a look at this person, instead of saying we're automatically just done with you, that there should be something done or further investigation or research by other people, and so that the vast majority can come to a conclusion, instead of just a small amount of people deciding this person is done, we're done with them, never see them again, or just wiping them off the face of the earth. There's no point in that. It doesn't help anybody, especially if the vast majority is not aware of this person. So, like, if let's just say, for a celebrity like Jeffree Star, a lot of people considered him to be very amazing, loved Jeffree Star. Even I once loved Jeffree Star. But when people brought out his racism and things that he says on a daily basis, how he treats people, and the things that he has contributed to, we were able to look for ourselves, see for ourselves, and understand that this was a problem. And since he did not take accountability, and instead of apologizing and moving forward and making sure that his actions were understood and that, okay, I'll never do it again, and repair, decided to buckle down and then proceed. So that person did get justification for their actions. He is no longer supported. That, I believe, is a proper way to do it. But with things like a small minority of people that just decide, oh, we're done with you, and then like a good chunk of people don't even know what's going on, that leaves confusion, and that leaves people picking sides, and that leaves anger. And then no one can have a proper conversation.
So the first person I can remember being canceled, like off the top of my head, like a long time ago, was like Kathy Griffin. You guys remember when Trump, not to bring him into area, I don't want to, but when he was elected and she had a fake head chopped off and it was bleeding and it was his head, and she like, everyone was just like, we don't want you, get rid of you. And then like now or later on, people were like, oh, maybe we should have given her a chance. But by then they'd already they fireballed her career very quickly, and it was a long-standing career. And I remember being like, yeah, what she did was wrong, but it wasn't that necessary. Like, they destroyed that woman's career that she built for so long, and I think that's just an example of when it's not just a one-sided issue, because that was not like, I don't know, explain. That was a comedian making a joke, and because of that, her whole career was ruined, and it still is not going to ever go back to how it was. So I think that was way too extreme, given what it was, and how now looking back on it, people have commented on it like, oh, much worse has happened from then. So I think it needs to be, because it was instant. Like, she did that, pictures released, boom, she's done. And if everyone had just taken a couple steps back and breathed and like, oh, what she did was wrong, and she did need to get held accountable for it partially, but they didn't need to like destroy everything she built for so long. And that's just like one example of like, it's too quick. It's very toxic, quick, you're done, pulled the plug, and now people are like, oh, maybe we should have been nicer. It's like, too late, you already got rid of her. So there needs to be like a period of, this person did something wrong, we're acknowledging that it's wrong, then let it not simmer. Don't ignore it, because if it's talk about it, because if you don't talk about something, it goes away. That's how most people get out of things. But don't just pull the plug instantly, like no matter the situation, because you're gonna look back in like a year or 2 years and be like, oh, maybe that wasn't the best thing that they could have done, but it's not the worst thing to be done at the time. Like there were far more worse things going on, but because she did that and the plug was just pulled and everything ruined, but no one was willing to have a conversation with her or with anyone about it. And she was like I think that it can't be so quick and easy. Like it needs to simmer but not grow. Like they need to stop it, but they don't need to destroy a person's career so quickly. Like I think that's the worst part. Like canceling them. I don't think that's okay. Holding them accountable is okay, but fully like you're done, that's not okay.
Because that actually, in 2019, I believe, God, I feel like it's been ages, but James Charles was also in a very similar situation such as that. He was wrongfully accused of multiple different things, and in a day, he lost millions of supporters and millions of different kinds of supporters and people he was working with, like Fenty, things like that. He no longer had their money, and he was losing things extremely quickly. He is a young adult, as he's barely 19, and just because a friend of his had wrongfully accused him of something for not doing something that she wanted, which was just selling his, he was ostracized, and he was put on this sudden pedestal for people to throw tomatoes at. And so far, at the beginning of it, he was losing pass, and no one was supporting him whatsoever because there was proof of this situation. And in reality, that was later, about a week later, confirmed to be false. Everything was false. He was totally in the right. There was nothing happened there. She was just falsifying his evidence so that he could be ostracized and canceled. So I definitely agree that there does not need to be a quick-paced thing about it, because it's something that is so serious and deadly for a person's career. And it definitely should not be taken lightly, especially as lightly as it is taken nowadays. Considering his entire career that he's built since he was in his just becoming 10 years old was almost destroyed just because someone didn't like the thing he did. And it wasn't even anything serious, it was a personal thing. So that also brings up the idea that sometimes things that people discuss with cancel culture are not only fake, but they can also be driven by another selfish idea or personal idea that only benefits that person.
I think that's just the danger of cancel culture. Is it's this very, it's very trend based. It's very mob mentality. It's kind of hive mind. So if one person has an idea, they spread everything. They say this person's bad. They show all the reasons why they're bad. None of the reasons why they could possibly not be bad. And we don't really look, we're very superficial. We just look at that, oh, right, well, they said this thing is bad, and I know this is bad because I'm an educated person, and I'm not going to look any further into this. 2 years later, I might look back at it and say, oh, I was wrong, but that doesn't matter to me. And we just go our lives like this, following our trends and never really thinking, well, was that right? Just on a more educated, looking deeper into it. And it's easier not to look deeper into it. I don't look deeper into things than I probably should. But I think that's just like how dangerous cancel culture can be. That if we just make these snap decisions, oh, I'm not going to do this anymore, it can really be weaponized against people, how it was against James Charles.
I think we do have to take a deeper look into things before seeing one post and saying, oh, never again will I follow him, watch his videos or something. I think we need to take a deeper look at something and look for our own selves instead of like allowing other people just to maybe say a rumor, a false accusation, allowing us to take a deeper look into things before we immediately snap a decision and cancel them.
You're right. And it also is regarding people who have power to cancel somebody. So if like the majority of the people think, oh, you're already canceled, you're automatically bad. Well, then people who automatically cancel them, it's like, oh look, we did a good job. Look out how fast we acted at shutting something down. Instead of, like you guys said, looking deeper into something that could potentially have two sides.
Yeah, especially with them gaining that idea that we were able to do this so quickly, let's do it more. That is incredibly dangerous and something that actually has happened. As we see, a lot more people are being canceled, and it's become a trend actually during the summer or fall in 2020 in Twitter just to randomly cancel just anybody. Like they would be trending for the week, and no one would talk to them or no one would treat them the same for the week. And celebrities and even people as considered not as famous as YouTubers, some YouTubers, had to look out, and they had to make sure that, oh God, okay, if this happens to me, what am I going to do? And they were all on the edge of their seats all summer because it was such a long-lasting trend that could have actually costed them something. Because a lot of people also didn't know that it was a trend. So of course, if you see cancel XYZ, you're going to be like, oh God, what did they do? And immediately assume that they're bad. So that would actually affect their viewership, that would affect who was contributing to their services, and it would lose them customers. And overall, it's just not something that should be treated as a toy, especially because people's voices have volume, and that shouldn't be used as a weapon.
We're kind of back around to the crucible with people crying witch kind of thing. And you got your band of girls screaming in the background, oh my gosh, they hurt me. And did they? Did they hurt you, or did you pinch yourself kind of thing? So.
Alright, so how are we on time? Good. Alright, so I think we should probably start kind of to wrap some stuff up. We still have to do our post surveys and whatnot, but thank you all obviously for coming out. This was being willing for everyone to be willing to participate. That was huge, and everyone contributed something really great to this conversation. I learned some stuff. My opinions even kind of changed a little bit, and I hope everyone else kind of took something away from this. That was really the goal of this whole exercise, was to get people to take something away and just kind of have a open discussion of how this topic affects you, how it positives, negatives, just not airing of grievances, but more of just talking. It's nice to talk, right? You know, we don't get to do it a lot in this time, Corona and whatnot. So, yeah, thank you all for coming. We're going to have you guys do the post surveys now. Yeah,
Just as we had pre-survey questions, we also have post ones for after the discussion. The first one of those would be, was there anything mentioned that you either had never heard of or knew little to no information about? If so, what was that topic? Do you view cancel culture any more positively or negatively after the discussion, and why or why not? Did your opinion on the idea of cancel culture change, or your opinion on the specific topic? Has your understanding on civil discussion changed after this exercise? Do you now believe that it is possible to have a civil discussion on heavy-hearted topics such as racism and hateful stereotypes? Why or why not? And overall, was this discussion a positive or negative one? Were your expectations met? Did something happen that you thought that wouldn't happen?